Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thanks so very much for tuning in today to raise your health IQ. Here's a staggering statistic for you. The obesity rate in 1950-ish was about 10%. Today, it stands at more than 40%. Why is that happening? Well, could it be that more and more of us are eating out at restaurants these days, going through the drive-through? And could it also be that the portion sizes at these restaurants have more than tripled over the past 60 or so years? Perhaps yes, and perhaps it's also the quality of food that we are eating. So the question today is restaurant food contributing to the obesity epidemic? So to discuss this, I am very excited to have two experts here with me today. Dr. Vanita Rahman, she is the clinic director at the Barnard Medical Center and author of the new book, Simply Plant-Based, a delicious recipe book, by the way. And also Matthew Rees, he is the editor of the Food and Health Facts newsletter, as well as a senior fellow at Dartmouth's Tuck School of Business. Thank you both so very much for being here.
Thanks for having us, Chuck.
Yeah, glad to be here, Chuck.
Mr. Rees, before we even get going, I understand, as fate would have it, you are actually the inspiration for Simply Plant-Based. Is this correct?
Well, Vanita and I go back several years, and the story is that someone had given me a diet book, and I showed it to her, and she was so taken aback by the ill-advised guidance in the book that she decided she was going to write her own book. And so I like to think that in some loose way, yes, I have contributed to Vanita pursuing her side career as an author, though she, of course, has great experience and great ideas on her own.
Well, thank you very much for planting that seed, because having the opportunity to flip through the book, it really is just packed full of healthy, delicious recipes that are miles ahead of the quality of food that the majority of us now are eating at restaurants across the country, and honestly, worldwide at this point. So, Dr. Rahman, simply put, I know that the two of you have paired up to write about this very topic on MedPage today, but let me just ask you flat out, how big of a problem, how much of a contributor to that problem are the foods that we're getting served at these restaurants?
Yeah, they're a significant contributor, Chuck. As we're going to share with you, restaurant meals are really subpar in their nutritional value compared to what they need to be. And we're also getting served these big servings of these subpar meals. So it's a dual problem. The food quality and the food quantity both are contributing.
I know. Is it a surprise to you to see the obesity trend tick so much in an upward direction as it is these portion sizes and the types of food that we've been gravitating to since the 1950s?
It's always shocking when I heard you give those statistics that the obesity rate was 10% in the 1950s, and now it's well over 40%. It's really concerning, and especially for our youth, and clearly restaurants are contributing to this. And this is something we can change. We don't have to stay in this path. We can change what we choose to eat. This is within our control.
Well, I would love to dive into some of the numbers here. I know that you have brought a presentation here with you today, so let me go ahead and bring that up on the screen as well. And so if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, fantastic. You can play the home game with us. If you're listening to this podcast, then no problem. Click the link in the episode notes and you can watch the presentation as well. And we're going to be talking about it throughout, so don't feel like you're missing out on anything. You're going to get all of the details as well. But Dr. Rahman, let's just dive right into this, because this is just such a fascinating topic, and it reminds me of when I was still significantly overweight, still well over 400 pounds, and the amount of money that I was spending every single day at restaurants. Honestly, I can't even remember cooking anything at home during this time. So this particular paper that you wrote, this article that you wrote, and the slides that you're going to be presenting today speak to me directly, and I think a lot of people who are also listening and watching us today.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I know, Chuck, you've been so candid about your struggles with food and how eating out played a role in it. So let me share some really interesting numbers here with everyone. First we share in this article that the proportions of meals that we're eating on a given day at restaurants is pretty high. So about 46% of Americans are consuming a fast food meal on a given day. Imagine that, 46%. And 30% of Americans are consuming a full service meal. And then 15% are consuming both. Now, really what was not just shocking about this was also the money that we're spending on restaurant meals. So from 2000 to 2018, our fast food spending increased by 45% to over $300 billion. Just imagine that. And even for full service, our spending increased by 37% to over $300 billion. So really staggering numbers there.
And that's just in the US?
That's just in the US, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a lot of money. Holy moly.
And now, but look at this slide. This is from our own CDC showing just how the portion sizes have ballooned in the US. The average soda has gone from 7 ounces to 42 ounces. That's 6 times as big. I mean, that's just mind-boggling there. And the typical burger has gone from 3.9 ounces to 12 ounces. That's 3 times bigger. You know what they call that 3.9 ounce burger now? They call it the kitty burger.
No, you're kidding. You're kidding.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling, right? And French fries have gone from 2.4 ounces to 6.7. Imagine we as humans have not evolved to needing 3 to 6 times the amount of food, but we are eating 3 to 6 times the amount of food when we dine out.
That's incredible. Mr. Rees, let me come over to you here. And don't age yourself here. I'm just going to throw this out. Have you noticed throughout your lifetime the portion sizes at these types of restaurants really increasing as we see on that graphic there?
Absolutely. I think the soda number is particularly compelling. And I think it's only in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years when you think about if you go out to a restaurant, it's unlimited refills on soda. And even at fast food restaurants now, I don't spend much time in them, but I have noticed that at McDonald's, the beverage section is where the consumers are. So you can just fill up as much as you want. And I think that's emblematic of how the food culture has changed and how ultimately the result is, as you pointed out, an adult obesity rate that exceeds 40%.
I didn't even think about the free refills being such a factor here. And that reminds me of not too terribly long ago, my wife and I went out to eat and I splurged and I got a lemonade. So for me, that is a splurge. And I remember like, boy, this was tasty. I want a second one. They were like, no free refills. That'll be another $5. And I was like, that's okay. You can keep that second lemonade. I will stick with water. So maybe that would be a deterrent there as well. But Dr. Rahman, as we saw, people are spending well in excess of $300 billion every single year on fast food. So we really are. I mean, I hate to paint kind of a glum picture here, but we're fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah. And, as Mr. Rees was saying, it's not just the soda. Some of these restaurants offer you unlimited breadsticks and that's not a whole grain bread. That's a very refined bread. But this has just become a problem. And then not to mention the all-you-can-eat buffets, right? That just sets us up to eat. Now, we've talked about the food quantity. Let's talk about the quality of food. Now, this is really fascinating. This study came out of Tufts, and this group does amazing research on nutrition. So they're telling us what the dietary quality of restaurant food has been like in the years 2015 to 2016. And what we see is for full service restaurants, over 50% of full service restaurant meals were of poor dietary quality. And no surprise that the number is even higher for fast food restaurants, where nearly 70% are of poor dietary quality. But what's really important here is that little number that I circled. You see that little 0.1% on each side? Those are the percentage of restaurant meals, whether full service or fast food, that were of ideal dietary quality. Just 0.1%. So let's just pause and think about that. How disturbing that is.
Can I translate that number? 0.1% means that for every 1,000 menu items, only one of them is ideal in terms
Yeah.
of your health. One out of every 1,000. That is insane.
And Chuck, that's not just for fast food, that's for full service too, because we sometimes assume that it's just fast food that's an issue, but we're seeing it's across the board, all types of restaurants.
Man, that is just incredible. Mr. Rees, let me pivot to you. I don't know how often you get the opportunity to dine out, but when you do you find yourself really having to scrutinize the heck out of the menu to try to find a healthy option?
Yeah, I do not dine out very often. As someone, Caldwell Esselstyn once said, and every time you dine out, it's really like you're going out into the Wild West. And there's, as we've just talked about, it's unlikely that most of the vast majority of the items on the menu are going to be unhealthy. And we need to remember that the restaurants, what do they fundamentally care about? They want you to like the taste of the food and feel like you're getting a good deal. They don't have any particular interest in the health of the food and ultimately the health of the consumers. So I'm one of those people who will occasionally even sometimes bring my own food to a restaurant if I'm eating with other people and simply indicate that I might have allergies or dietary restrictions. And it's not always well received, but ultimately, I'm more interested in my health than in whether or not the server likes having me there.
You, sir, are a rebel bringing your own food into a restaurant. How does one tip for bringing your own food into a restaurant?
Yes, it sometimes brings challenges, and sometimes the other guests aren't too happy about it. But I will go to great lengths just to avoid eating out, and in particular when I'm traveling. I'm one of those people who brings a full meal on the airplane with me, and when I'm traveling, I typically try to stay in hotels that have kitchens, because the last thing I want to do is have to sort of be stuck with the choices that are available on airplanes or in restaurants, which again are going to be the vast majority of them are going to be unhealthy.
That is such good advice right there. That is such good advice. I always just look to the mini fridge in the hotel room when I'm traveling. That's a must have. I don't always go with the kitchen. I just try to, what can I put in there, even if it's just carrots and hummus, and that's what I'm eating for a little while, whatever. But I like the kitchen idea. I'm going to lift that. That is good advice. Dr. Rahman, before we move on, could you really quickly define for us what an ideal meal is when we're talking about the quality of restaurant food here?
Yeah, so the way the research team defined ideal quality was basically the type of foods that we talk about, rich in fiber, low in saturated fat, low in overall fat, low in processed ingredients, low in added sugars. And what they found was that most of these restaurant meals are high in saturated fat, high in fat, low in fiber, and high in sodium. And that's really the crux of the problem, is that they're using processed ingredients. They're not using these wholesome plant-based foods that we talk about that are high in fiber and naturally low in fat.
Boy, yeah. There it is, fiber. We're just in short supply of that in the standard American diet, but sodium and fat are two things that we have in abundance. Let's talk a little bit more about the ways that your food can help prevent diseases and things like that. I know that that's something that you have also covered extensively in your paper, and I believe that you have a slide on that as well.
Yeah, so recently there's been a lot in the news. The FDA has recommended that the commercial food industry voluntarily reduce the sodium content of food. And that's because sodium consumption in the US is very high. The average American is consuming about 50% more sodium than they should. So if we look at the recommendations for sodium intake, they are anywhere from 1,500 to 2,300 milligrams a day. Less is always better, especially if you have high blood pressure or heart failure or chronic kidney disease. But the average American is getting 3,400 milligrams a day. So the FDA is now asking for the commercial food industry to voluntarily reduce the amount of sodium in food, but that's, I don't know how effective that will be. It's definitely a step in the right direction, but clearly sodium is playing a big role in all of this.
Yeah, it's literally in almost every kind of food imaginable. It's so important to flip over whatever it is that you're buying at the store and look at the nutrition facts on there. And a lot of times you will just be flabbergasted at the amount of sodium that's in a particular food. Do you have with you a breakdown of where the majority of sodium comes from in our diet?
Yes. So what's really, most often people think when they think about cutting the sodium in their diet, they're thinking they should get rid of their table salt that they add to the table at the table or when they cook. But this graph from the CDC really captures it. And as we see, over 70% of the sodium in our diet is coming from commercial food. It's coming from processed food or restaurant food. So that's really where the bulk of it is. The sodium that we add at the table or when we cook, that's only about 10% of our daily sodium intake. But we really need to pay attention to these restaurant meals and anything that we buy that comes in a jar or frozen or in a package. Check that sodium content.
Yeah, Mr. Rees, let me come to you for this and just this is just mind blowing to me because before I really started to do the exam room and hunker down and learn a lot about nutrition, when somebody was like, well, you need to cut a lot of sodium, a lot of salt out of your diet, the first thing I thought of, and really the only step I thought that I needed to take was not to put salt on top of my food. Were you under that same impression?
I was, and it's easy to be lulled into that. And I think that this chart is so compelling. And I think just to add to that, in terms of kind of the health implications, 45% of all adult deaths from diabetes, heart disease, and stroke are a function of an unhealthy diet, of which sodium obviously is a big factor. And it just speaks to really just the implications of and the great risks associated with having these diets high in sodium and high in sugar and high in fat.
And Dr. Rahman, so when somebody is looking to reduce sodium in their diet, before we get to talking about cooking at home or cooking in hotel rooms, I want to ask you, what advice do you give patients when they come in and maybe they do have an issue with their blood pressure? It's too high and they want to get that sodium under control. What are some of the tips that you give them as far as foods that they can get when they're eating out or even buying something at the store?
Yeah, really be an educated consumer. Read the nutrition label. You alluded to that, Chuck. Whenever you buy something that has a nutrition label, read the nutrition label. And a good rule of thumb to use is if it has more sodium than calories per serving, put it back. That's too much sodium. And if we stay with that rule, we'll generally be right where we land. And if you're dining out and you're going to like a big chain restaurant, they are required to disclose their nutritional information. And you may have seen some of that already when you order your food. They'll give you the caloric content, but they're not giving you the sodium content or the fat content. To do that, you really have to do some digging and detective work, but it's on their website. It's on a different website, so you have to say restaurant XYZ nutritional information, and then you will find that website, and it will be in teeny tiny print, but it's in there, and it's just staggering the amount of sodium that's in food. Even desserts can be loaded with sodium.
That is an interesting thing. I learned that when I was tallying up all of the fat and calories that I used to have with my daily Taco Bell addiction. And I was thinking that, the one thing that I didn't have to worry about sodium content with was the caramel empanada that I would eat for dessert. But that thing had almost almost as much sodium in it as some of the burritos. It was just unbelievable how much sodium is just in literally everything. So when you go and you eat out, whether it's a drive-through, a fast food restaurant, or even at a chain restaurant, there are some hoops that you need to jump through to make sure that you're not eating a sodium bomb. But the easiest way to control your sodium, I would argue, is doing exactly what Mr. Rees was talking about, and that is cooking for yourself. So, Dr. Rahman, I'd be remiss here if I didn't ask you about some of the benefits that can come from cooking at home.
So there are so many great benefits to cooking at home. First of all, we know exactly what's going into our meal. We can see the actual ingredients. When a food comes out in a restaurant, we don't really know. It's guesswork. And when you're cooking at home, emphasize those fruits, the vegetables, the legumes, and the whole grains, and use herbs and spices to flavor your food. So that automatically reduces the sodium content. And then the other benefits of home cooked meals is they tend to be lower in saturated fat and fat. They tend to be lower in added sugar because we know exactly how much we're adding, and you can bet they're much lower in sodium. Now, of course, assuming we're using fresh ingredients, if we're using processed ingredients like pre-made sauces or dressings, then we do need to check the sodium content of those. So there's so many benefits of preparing our own meals at home, and it's cheaper too.
Mr. Rees, before you got into cooking for yourself, were you a big let's eat out kind of a guy?
Food for me was always kind of a function of convenience and fuel, and I have been fairly active in sports for much of my life, and so I just wanted to fill myself up. So it was never a big priority, and so yeah, fast food would be something that was, I would say, a regular part of my diet, and then certainly a lot of just processed foods, and recognizing over time and that sort of the health risks associated with that, and how much more beneficial it would be to follow a healthier and in particular a plant-based diet, made it ultimately fairly easy for me once I had that recognition to make the switch and to really drop all of those foods from my diet.
Yeah, and so we do know that eating a healthier diet can lead to reversal, prevention of a lot of these chronic diseases that are attributable to, I think you two said 45% of deaths currently in this country. But I want to stick with you here, Mr. Rees, and ask more short term to that. Can you tell a difference physically in just your body, how you feel when you eat something that you've prepared at home versus when you do on that rare occasion wind up eating something out at a restaurant?
Without a doubt. Yeah, I think that, I have certainly found my whole digestive system, I think, has adjusted, and it punishes me if I'm eating something that's unhealthy that maybe I didn't have control over at an event, at a dinner, and that's why it's so much, I place such a premium on trying to control what I eat, and again, traveling with food, because I ultimately feel better, I sleep better, I think I perform I'm an active swimmer, I think I swim better after I've eaten those meals. So for me, it's not any question this is a sort of a nutritional regimen that I want to maintain.
And I think that now, given the circumstances that we're facing with COVID-19, more than ever, it's important that we do look at the quality of nutrition that we are fueling our bodies with. And so, Dr. Rahman, I got to ask you, I mean, when you look at the fact that just 1/10 of 1% of these restaurant meals are of ideal quality, how do you think that this fast food nation that we live in and the food choices that we're making are playing into the current state of things with this pandemic?
Yeah, they're playing a huge role, Chuck, because that meal that we have at a restaurant, it may take us 10 minutes to eat it, but its impact stays for a long time. And one unhealthy, and food is addictive, and food quantity is addictive. So if we eat a meal that's 6 times larger than what we need to eat at a restaurant, that doesn't just stop there. It translates into bigger portion sizes at home too. And if we eat a high fat meal at a restaurant, then that's what we crave at home too. So it's just sort of a ripple effect. It really makes a profound difference.
And Mr. Rees, how did your cravings change over time when you gravitated toward this healthier diet? Did you find yourself craving these types of unhealthy foods less and less, or was it, kind of a deal where as soon as you changed your diet, the craving stopped?
Yeah, the cravings really did stop. Fortunately, I found that I think partly because of the, becoming an educated consumer and realizing just how unhealthy a lot of these foods were, and the flip side being how healthy the fruits and the vegetables and foods high in fiber were, it was fairly easy to make the change. And also, I think it's important to point out you discover all sorts of new foods when you adopt this diet. And for me, one of the foods I certainly never had is what's known. You can find them in Whole Foods. They're often under the name of Japanese sweet potatoes or Korean sweet potatoes, and they're fabulous. And they're easy to cook, and they're also very easy to travel with. And so typically, whether traveling domestically or even foreign, I will often keep them in my suitcase, and you can simply put them in the oven, and they're quite satiating as well as being delicious.
And one of the more interesting points that you both raised in the article that you penned for MedPage Today was the fact that with the boom of food delivery services, these types of unhealthy restaurant foods are more readily available than ever. Um, how much of a factor, like, do you think that too is contributing to the food choices that we're making now that it's literally these types of food, the Big Mac, the French fries that are 3 times larger than they used to be? It's literally just right in the palm of our hands, Dr. Rahman.
Yeah, I think it's a huge problem. This always makes me chuckle because I was talking to a friend once and I said, how often do you eat out? Do you eat out a lot? And she said, no, sometimes I just carry out. So now it's become even easier. We don't have to drive somewhere. We have all these, we can, at the palm of our hand is our smartphone that we can pretty much control the world with. We can order anything and it can be delivered, and it's adding to that. The convenience of ordering food is a big trade-off with the health profile. So we really have to think about all that.
Yeah, matter of fact, I just pulled up Uber Eats here on my phone, and within a half an hour, I can have anything I want from McDonald's delivered right to my door.
Wow.
So that's kind of a scary thought. And it's not just McDonald's, it's literally every fast food restaurant known to man. And that's the other thing with these apps. It's like there are very few healthy choices on there. You really have to go out of your way to find a restaurant that will deliver to you that offers healthy choices. Matter of fact, I'll take it a step further and tell you, and this is kind of concerning to me, is that I was speaking with someone who owns what is arguably the healthiest restaurant in all of the Washington, D.C. metro area. And she was telling me that they had to stop using these apps. One, just because it wasn't cost effective for them, but two, I don't think that there was necessarily that appetite for that type of food when somebody opens up and Uber Eats. They are gravitating toward these chain restaurants and these fast food restaurants. Mr. Rees, I mean, do you agree with Dr. Rahman here that this is really kind of problematic?
Absolutely. I think that the COVID, I was hoping, would be an inflection point and raise greater awareness around obesity and the risks associated with it. And we've certainly seen data showing that obesity rates have been rising over the past 18 months. And I think that there are a variety of reasons for that, but certainly the expanded access to unhealthy food from deliveries is contributing to that. And I think it's a worrying trend, and everyone's all for convenience, and that's great. But I just recently came across a study looking at countries and how much time people in each country spend eating, and the study actually showed that the more time people devote to eating, the lower the obesity rates. And what it speaks to is if you are spending time cooking, you're more likely to be eating healthier food. And we seem in the United States, we seem to be going in the opposite direction. And I think we're already paying the price, and we're going to continue to pay a price for many years to come.
And that brings us to arguably what is the most important point of this entire conversation. And that is, again, cooking at home. And Dr. Rahman, this is the perfect time to talk about Simply Plant-Based, which is just such a great book that is chock full of recipes that are really easy for people to make at home that can help reverse this obesity trend. I mean, I'm just flipping through it right now, and there is something for everyone in here, right down to the hardcore sports fan in your life. I'm on a page 116 in the book for cauliflower wings that are absolutely delicious and will knock your socks off. So when you were putting all of these recipes together, how mindful were you of the way that people are currently eating and the need to kind of offer them healthier alternatives to that?
Very mindful, because what I really wanted was for people to enjoy the food. People have to enjoy the food. If they don't enjoy it, then they won't eat it. But then it also needs to be easy to make. Nobody wants to slave away for hours in the kitchen. We want to just be in and out as quickly as we can. But then this part was really important to me. It has to be nutritious. There's no point whipping together a meal if it's not healthy. We need it to be tasty, easy, and delicious. And those were my 3 requirements when I put the recipes together. And I had a lot of tasters at home that were eager to help me finesse those.
Why didn't you call me? I would have, so volunteered for that job. And the final question is this. So we know that 0.1% of all restaurant meals are of ideal quality, but of the recipes in Simply Plant-Based, what is that percentage at?
Oh, I would say very close to 100%. We're using whole grains, we're using legumes and fruits and vegetables. We're really minimizing any processed food and minimizing the fat and sodium and optimizing the fiber. So you can enjoy these guilt-free.
All right. Well, Mr. Rees, Mr. Matthew Rees, Dr. Vanita Rahman, I want to thank you both so very much for being here today. Just a phenomenal article that you two have penned. And again, Dr. Rahman, congratulations on the release on the book. And, thank you both very much for just shedding some incredible light on a topic that really goes so overlooked, but can make such a big difference in the lives of so many people. So thank you both very much for being here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
If your health IQ is a couple of points higher than it was a few minutes ago, go ahead and like this video or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And to take it even higher, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your favorite shows. Look for The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. Hit the subscribe button there as well and help to make your world a healthier place.